Hello and welcome to another instalment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adokru. Today, we'll be talking all about Mauricio Pochettino, his background, his time at Spurs, and we'll discuss whether he's the right man for PSG. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Yfootball_ and subscribe with us on all our platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Etches, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Jordan. Yeah, so on a quick side note, Fetty Wap just dropped an album after quite a long hiatus. He used to control the radio with Trap Queen, Come My Way. Like he was
Yeah,
releasing
yeah,
Pure Fire. That was like 2015.
yeah.
He dropped an album yesterday, so I quite enjoyed listening to that. My flatmate. Overall, as a 5 out of 10. I thought I'd share that with the pods in
Oh
case.
no, why?
Yeah. I don't know. So like. Basically, he came out of nowhere. He had one eye, and he absolutely smacked the radio. Like the radio was getting smacked up, and then he kind of went away. He dropped the tape last year. It was okay. Dropped the album. It was all right. It wasn't too exciting. So that's kind of how I'm feeling because I'm still pondering over whether I should listen again. But apart from that, not much, mate. It's lockdown. Here recording the pod. Living room's quite cold, so morale's a bit low. Morale's a bit low, but the topic today is very good, so that's lifted my spirits. How are you doing?
Yeah, not well. If I was a football manager, centre forward, my morale would be not abysmal, but it'd be like when the arrows just went a bit like kind of.
Orange, red, red's abysmal. Yeah, orange. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
basically,
terrible.
I was content, but then I had a conversation with the manager. He's not playing me, so I went a bit down again. So yeah, not doing too well. No, it's lockdown, so I'm just ambivalent at the minute. But it's hopefully it gets to springtime. It starts to brighten up. The Euros will hopefully go ahead. As with the Olympics, and I just love to watch England in the Euros. I know you're a big Nigeria fan, Itches. Obviously, they won't be in the Euros, but in the Olympics, in the under 23s, that'll be good fun. So I just hope these things go ahead because life is just boring at the minute.
Yeah, I remember eating a pad thai in Thailand, watching Nigeria lose to Germany in the last Olympics.
How was that pad thai anyway?
You know what? I was actually smashed as well. I can't remember what time it was. I think I literally couldn't even tell you what time it was. I remember I was waved walking past the bar, eating a bad time, Nigeria on, and I remember just walking in on my own and just sitting down and watching it. The food I was eating wasn't even from that place. I just brought it in with me.
So, Etches, kicking off this morning. So why Mauricio Pochettino as the topic today?
Personally, I think Pochettino has been one of the neutrals' favourites, especially in the Premier League, for a long, long time. I can't really say why. I think it's just his aura, his personality. Tottenham are always seen as the underdogs. As an Arsenal fan, I personally quite liked him.
Mm,
He was an unknown quantity when he arrived at Southampton. Many people forget when he was joined Southampton, Nigel Adkins was manager, and I believe Southampton were like 14th. They'd
yeah.
just come up. And I remember saying to my dad, "Oh, they shouldn't have done that. Like he deserves more of a chance." But obviously, they were looking further forward, and they plucked Pochettino out, who had just left Espanyol,
Yeah.
and the rewards were fantastic. I think his commitment to young players were always admirable, and he always played an attractive brand of
Mhm.
football. After he left Southampton, he joined Tottenham, where he led them to the Champions League final, as we all know. But then when he left, it was kind of this assumption of, oh yeah, every top club will be knocking on his door. Man United were linked for a long time as doubts over Ole lingered. But
Yeah.
the job never materialized. We watched Hansi Flick take over at Bayern. We've seen Pirlo take over at Juventus,
Mhm.
and before him, Sarri. Arsenal have hired Mikel Arteta. I doubt he would have joined, but
Yeah.
the biggest jobs have kind of drifted by, and you wondered where it'd end up. I thought PSG was a really interesting fit. I don't think it was the best fit, which I'll go into later on, but I wanted to do a podcast as to whether he'll succeed there, the issues he'll kind of have there, and what he'll bring to the table.
Yeah, it's a romantic appointment because obviously he was a former player. But yeah, as you said, we'll go on to it. But whether he's a fit or not or a good fit is questionable. But who can forget that team that he came through with at Tottenham? Like bringing through obviously like the likes of Danny Rose, Dia came in, Kyle Walker came through the ranks, and this young team just exploded. And it was at the old White Hart Lane as well that I've been to once actually following Sunderland, and it's it wasn't the it wasn't the most like kind of aesthetically pleasing ground, but like as a football stadium, it was brilliant. And like it was almost as if when Tottenham were firing, when Son was firing, Kane, Ericsson, the whole team, the ball was just sucked into the net. It was just incredible attacking football.
A quick question for you, Jordan. Did Sunderland actually win that game?
No, we lost. Darren Bent missed a penalty against his old club. So
No. Yeah, no surprises there. I thought before we discuss whether Poch would be a good fit, I think we needed to kind of give some context over PSG's owners. Everyone's aware they're very rich. Everyone's aware they're from
yep.
the Middle East. But originally PSG were owned by fans, with the inception in 1970. Changing hands on multiple occasions. Then in 2011, they're bought out by Qatar Sports Investment, or QSI, which
Yep.
is a state-run company controlled by Tanim bin Hamad Al Thani, who is the ruler of Qatar. It's kind of an interesting factor because it means that PSG and Man City are the only clubs in world football owned by a
Yep. Yep.
state, like an
Mhm.
actual state, which is
Yeah.
in itself quite interesting.
Yeah.
We're aware that when QSI took over, a wealth of talent came over the years, including Thiago Silva, Neymar,
Mhm.
Mbappe, Ibra, David Beckham, Di Maria, Buffon, Dani Alves. The list goes on and on. And I think one thing I wanted to highlight on this is this heavy influx of players has made PSG huge, very successful, within their own league. But, that Champions League has kind of eluded them. We've seen managers like Laurent Blanc, Carlo Ancelotti, Unai Emery, Thomas Tuchel coming over the years, but they failed to deliver that golden PSG. They've
Yeah.
spent over 1 billion on transfers since they've come
Wow.
in. And as much as it's a bottomless pit of money, as everyone says, they've had Champions League bans over their spending and their wage bill, and I believe that they want success now. That's something which I think these investors want. It's not something where they want to say, okay, there's a 5-year plan. There is a
Yeah.
5-year
Yeah.
plan, but winning is now.
Yeah, absolutely. And people have talked about Pochettino going to United as being this person that can rebuild a football club, whereas they're not looking for a manager to perhaps come in, build him. Or maybe they are, but we don't know that. But we get the impression that PSG don't want a manager to come in and build the youth and spend 5 years or a handful of years like they did at Tottenham, bringing through these young players to then get some sustained success. The idea is that they want to win Champions League probably the next couple of years, few years, because of the money they invested, the players they have at their disposal. Perhaps he can do it. He's a pragmatist. Perhaps he can inspire the players. But PSG have only last season was the only season they've went beyond the quarterfinal stage, which is quite an interesting statistic, or at least since QIS took over. So, Etches, who exactly is Mauricio Pochettino?
So his full name is Mauricio Roberto Pochettino Trasoro.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd give myself 10 out of 10 for
Yeah, nice.
pronunciation there.
Nice one.
He played as a central defender, beginning his professional career in 1989 at Newell's Old Boys, former club of everyone's favourite Marcelo Bielsa.
Hmm.
He actually coached him there, and Pochettino refers to him as one of his influences in
Yeah.
coaching, which we'll come on to in a bit later. There, he won a league title and finished runners-up in the 1992 Copa Libertadores. 94, he then transferred to newly promoted Liga Club Espanyol, a club he then went on to coach, helping them establish their top flight status. And he won the Copa del Rey in 2000, their first trophy in
Mhm.
6 years. In 2001, he actually joined PSG, where he won the defunct Intertoto Cup. He also had a spell at Bordeaux before returning to Espanyol, and he won another Copa del Rey in 2006. On the international scene, he played 20 times for Argentina and played in the 1999 Copa America and 2002 World Cup, which England fans will remember very well. Interestingly, Pochettino's first taste in coaching was at Espanyol, where he was assistant in the women's team before moving on to the senior
Mm.
side, and that's where his career took off, as we all know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting fact. Actually, you don't see that too often in world football, particularly someone as revered as Pochettino starting in the women's game. The Intertoto Cup was always it was always a bit annoying. Newcastle United used to always qualify for the UEFA Cup by winning that competition and like finishing like ninth, and I always found it just like who were they playing against? But yeah, no, I wasn't that bothered. Just a aggressive Southern fan with a little going on in his own club. Yeah, and you mentioned 2002 World Cup. Yeah, Pochettino gave away the penalty that Beck's converted, brought down Michael Owen after a little jig from him. So, Etch, what will Pochettino bring to the role, do you believe?
Yeah, I think there's a clear theme in Pochettino's time at Spurs and Southampton was his belief in youth players, as I mentioned earlier, and the ability to make them better. There was an incredible stat in 2017 where 15 of England's last 30 debutants had played
Mm,
under the manager. Now, I know loads of people will be firing at me, being like, that's not particularly impressive. But, each of those 15 players had key roles under Poch, improved under Poch, or made their debut
yeah,
whilst playing under the former Spurs boss. So, to pick out a few names, Luke Shaw had his breakout season at fullback under Pochettino before moving on to Manchester United. I believe he's in PFA Team of the Year. It was an astounding year for him. Adam Lallana, who's one used to be one of my favourite players in the league, flourished under him. Harry Kane, although he made his debut under Tim Sherwood, the forgotten man, he was also fantastic as well under Pochettino and
yeah,
grew and grew and grew, arguably to the player he is now, which is obviously brilliant. And Pochettino got the best out of Dele Alli, towards the end of his time there. He was on a bit of a downward trajectory, but he was also fantastic with his goal scoring record in his first 2 or 3 seasons at the club. And I think that belief in youth and specifically the ability to make players better will
yeah,
apply at PSG. They do as much as they do have some superstars there, they have some young players that can get even better. You look at Bakar, the young fullback that's playing, even some of the centre halves. They've got Thilo Kehrer, who's a young player
yeah,
there. You've
mhm,
got even Mbappe, he's one of the world's best players, but is still only 21 or 20.
yeah,
So he can obviously improve under him. Uh, Not just that, his Southampton sides as well as his Spurs sides and Espanyol teams were relentless in defence. I think when he took over at Tottenham, that was one of the most noticeable things in particular was how aggressive they were in the press, as well as playing an attractive brand of football, which
yeah,
neutrals and fans and opponents admired. I actually tuned into PSG's first game against Ethnian the other day, and that press was very apparent, in particular as the
mm,
pitch. They seemed much more aggressive than they did under Tuchel, so hopefully that continues. Pochettino tends to alternate between a 4-2-3-1 and a 4-3-3 formations, whilst defending in a 4-4-2/4-1-4-1. His choice is often guided by subduing the strengths of his teams that he was facing and also taking advantage of any potential weaknesses. So he's got that pragmatic approach
yeah,
about him. He tends to also combat teams that play three at the back, playing three at the back himself, which he used to do at Tottenham on occasion. I think one of the other brilliant skills or things about Pochettino is his man management, which is seen as vital in holding together what seemed from the outside a very tight Tottenham group who exceeded expectation.
yeah,
Many of the players there that we now love when they were signed weren't as good. Players like Moussa Dembele's profile improved, even though he was a good player. Juan Min Son's profile improved massively, even though he's a good
yeah,
player. Dele Alli, Harry Kane, the fullbacks, Kyle Walker, even people like Ben Davies. You think of all of those players that they kind of have. Danny Rose for a period of time when he was linked to Manchester United. All of these guys before Pochettino were good Premier League standard players, but their profiles boomed by his management. Pochettino actually said about his man management skills on the pitch, it's less important. He told Sky Sports News. He actually said, I think the most important thing is outside of the pitch, the man management. Football is changing, it's moving forward. Today, the kids are different to 20 years ago. I need to understand that.
yeah.
And I think that gives a lot of insight into how he kind of deals with that and how he deals with different characters. And clearly, from his time at previous clubs, has reaped rewards.
Definitely. Yeah, Southampton have a recent history of developing youth, or just a general history of developing youth. So it's no surprise to see them bring in a manager of his mould, but obviously bucked the trend at Spurs. I mentioned before, they had Harry Redknapp, they had managers like Tim Sherwood, Juan de Ramos, who hadn't really worked out over the years. Um, and he managed to progress the club into a Champions League outfit. Obviously, they reached the Champions League final, but they were consistently in the top four. Whereas prior to that, they were kind of noisy outside of there. They were kind of like the old Aston Villa Everton mold, where they were kind of fighting for that top four kind of slash like Europa League, UEFA Cup spots, and it wasn't really seemingly working out on a consistent basis. So I think it's really exciting to see him at PSG. He's a massive pragmatist. It's no surprise to see the Bielsa links, given the way he is as a coach, and I hope he succeeds. So, just moving on to PSG, what issues do you think he faces at the club?
I mean, the big one, number one on the list, is demanding owners. So at Spurs,
Yeah.
Pochettino built them into Champions League regulars. He threatened to win the title on 2 occasions, which nearly caused me to leave the country. Um, and they got to the Champions League final, which is obviously brilliant. But these guys want success very quickly. I don't know how long his contract is, but he would have to, I would assume, get to the semi-finals
Yeah.
win the first two seasons, and I would say win the treble domestically to stay in the job. I would say they would probably consider sacking him after 2 years without winning it, because bigger managers with bigger profiles have failed before him and have been shown the door for maybe a bit more or a bit less. The immense pressure to deliver is huge. We mentioned that they have young players in the squad, but a lot of them as well are getting older. Neymar is 29 in February, I believe.
Yeah.
We've got players in that squad like Verratti, Idrissa Gueye, Di Maria. They've just got rid of Thiago Silva, but they've got some aging players. I wouldn't say they're over the hill, but players in their prime. So, they're kind of for the now to really win. So I think that's the pressure
Yeah.
he has to try and get past. I mean, the next one is getting players on board. So Thomas Tuchel was said to be the best coach for the PSG players since Ancelotti. Ancelotti was there a long, long time ago now. And I think Tuchel has generally done very well in motivating his squads wherever he's been. The players spoke of him very highly at Dortmund, some saying he is better than Klopp. If you apply that
Mm.
to PSG, it was the same sort of thing where players really, really like working under him after a difficult time under Unai Emery. So when that kind of happens and the players like a coach, it can sometimes be a bit tricky to really get your ideas across. At Tottenham and at Espanyol and Southampton, Pochettino has dealt with very few, I would say, global international stars. Within the PSG dressing room, he's got 5 or 6 or 7 strong
Yeah. Yeah.
personalities that will
Mhm.
be difficult to navigate. Pochettino said himself, you want players that you can coach that let you coach them. Players that are always available to give their best, players whose purity is football. That is the most important. I think the first line in particular may not be as easy as Tottenham, Espanyol, and Southampton at PSG. I'm thinking more on people maybe like Neymar or some of the older players that are such established stars may not be as giving to some of his requests from coaching, and it'll be interesting to see how he tackles that. I mean, Neymar could actually be very easy to coach. I don't know, but
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
it's a different profile of player, I would
Yeah.
say, to the players he's coached before. Whereas Tottenham, they tended to be younger, less established, but equally very talented, but very different to your Marquinhos's, your Neymars again, to your Verrattis, to your Paredes, Florenzi. These are guys who have been around various clubs for a few years at least. I think another one which people don't really realize is they need to sort out issues with their youth talent leaving. Over the years, PSG, as good as their first team has been, has let some extremely talented youth players leave for nothing or for very little. You got Guendouzi on here, who's at Hertha Berlin on loan. Kingsley Coman, obviously, is doing well. Moussa Dembele, who's been linked to Atletico Madrid.
Yeah.
Adrian Rabiot at Juventus now. Christopher Nkunku, who's done so well at RB Leipzig. Yassin
Mm.
Adli and Hussein Haddad of Celtic. They've all left in search of first team football, but you could pick out a few names in that list who could definitely make a difference to the PSG
Yeah.
squad. One or two of them could be pushing for an actual star, and then you wonder if all of these guys in the academy, did it really make sense to start spending 30, 40, 50 million pounds when you could have just
Yeah.
backed that youth
Definitely.
and
Yeah.
given them opportunities? I think another important one, arguably the biggest, is tying down Neymar and Kylian Mbappe. Both of them have a year left this summer. Neymar's a bit trickier because he's 29, obviously a very, very talented player. But it's a tricky contract, that one, because it's normally
Yeah.
the players
Very tricky.
last. Someone like Neymar is so good, he probably may have another one after that, but whether that be at PSG or not, who knows? Kylian Mbappe is the priority.
Mhm.
He's got the world at his feet, arguably one of the top 5 players in the world now. So much raw talent, so much speed, so much ability. I think he would be the key for them, but both of them running down is a bit of a worry. Both of them probably want to be paid top dog at the club, I would
Mm.
assume.
Yeah.
It's quite a tricky one to balance. On the pitch, they seem great together. They seem to work very well, but that status for the top dog at the club is a bit of a tricky one. And I'm interested to see how that kind of pans out. Barca and Real have been linked to both. Real for Mbappe, Barca for Neymar. So it'd be interesting to see whether Pochettino can help sort that out, because at the moment it hasn't been sorted. And I think last point, which is a really interesting one, is PSG haven't actually won a second leg in the Champions League for 7 years. It's actually much longer
Mm.
than 7 years, but I hate those stats where, when it's like, oh, Arsenal haven't won away to Warsaw for 55 years and they've only played them once. It's like, well, obviously that's why.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
But in the last 7 years, they've been in the Champions League regularly. They haven't won a second leg game in the Champions League. Hence why last year really suited them with the two legs of football. But I think Pochettino needs to tackle that in order to progress in this year's tournament.
Yeah, I think we're almost. This is a bit of a bold claim, but we're kind of creeping out of the. Oh, we are creeping out of the kind of the Messi Ronaldo era, if we like to call it that. Hearing Neymar is 29 makes me feel a bit older, and is mad really to think, because we all remember him at Santos coming through. But
Yep.
he's not too much younger than Messi Ronaldo to an extent. And we're looking toward that new era of superstars. So Mbappe would lead that line. He's potentially a future Ballon d'Or winner. Even people like Felix at Atletico Madrid. These are the new crop of talent that's coming through. And your point on Pochettino and his interview at Sky Sports, for example, I saw the same interview, and it crept up on Twitter quite a bit because he made a comparison between Dele Alli and Ronaldinho Maradona. And he wasn't making that comparison in terms of playing ability. He wasn't saying Dele Alli is comparable to Ronaldinho because on the pitch they're very similar, because they're not, as we all know, because Ronaldinho and Maradona were exceptionally well gifted in dribbling, technical ability. Ali is a very different player. But where he's making the comparison is in terms of personality. So he was saying that Ronaldinho and Maradona have infectious personalities. Dele Alli has an infectious personality. Someone who's around the training pitch, can inspire young players, can really galvanise the team. And that comparison I thought was quite interesting. And then when it was came onto the conversation about PSG, people were talking about, well, is that why he's been brought in? Because he can perhaps galvanise a PSG team that's full of superstars. And we think about, and your point on Neymar earlier about whether he's easy to coach or not, we make assumptions based on our snippets we see these players and even managers as well in the media, and we make these assumptions based on based on their personalities, based on these little snippets of time we see them on the pitch or little clips we get of them in press conferences, and we don't know them as people. And Neymar could have a really infectious personality, and he is a superstar. Perhaps Pochettino is the man to really bring that out and actually use it to PSG's advantage, where in the past people have assumed that it's a disadvantage having a superstar like Neymar. We've heard the stories about his dad and the partying, but I think it's a really key point. And I think I really, really, really want Pochettino to do well there, and I think perhaps as a pragmatist that he is, he can.
I think you make a really good point about Neymar. I think it's one of those where someone so technically gifted that seems to have such a free role because of his ability. I mean, Jack Grealish has a relatively free role at Villa. The difference
Yeah,
is that when you're those types of players, you often believe they can't they're more difficult to coach because of the free nature of their roles within their sides.
yeah,
When actually, a good example of Jack Grealish, especially when it came to the England side, when you actually task them with something more rigid, they can easily do it. It's just that maybe they've never been tasked to do it before. I know that Neymar worked very well within a Barca setup that wasn't as free roaming because of the likes of Messi and Suarez being in the team, and he was great there. It's more of a case of whether Pochettino can get that out of him now. There's no reason why he wouldn't be able to. I think his
yeah,
man management is brilliant. I personally think the PSG players are really warm to him. He is immensely talented, and when we talk about whether he'll succeed, I think the reservations from top sides was his lack of wins as a coach, which is unfair. I think if you analyze his time at Tottenham, I said when he was there, he was the best manager in the league for the money that he had, the players that he then turned into superstars.
yeah, yeah.
We're looking at 18 million for Heung-min Son,
Hmm.
minimal amounts of money for Kyle Walker, people like Ben Davies, Kieran Trippier. These are guys all signed for around, I think, under £15 million.
Yeah,
We're looking at up top. There've been some not so good players as well. Obviously, Harry came from the academy. Dele Alli for 5 million. The amount of money that these guys have made off these players in terms of making them better has been brilliant. I do think as well, what may have left a sour taste in potential suitors was his end to Tottenham. You know, he had collected 25 points from their last 24 games, which is mad.
Mm.
I think
Mm.
he was in a very strong position when he started that bad run. So it wasn't very noticeable because it was towards the end of the season. But then when it carried over into next year, it became more apparent. That was also mixed in with the fantastic nights of the Champions League, the Ajax away victory or
Yeah.
second leg victory, sorry, and the Man City game where they won as well, and obviously the Champions League final. But that was pretty poor. You know, it, I think my only worry at PSG is whether he'll get enough time because I do think it really is now. I think they're not too far away from a rebuild in certain areas where some of their players will be a bit over the hill. They do have some great young players coming through, but I'm just worried that he may not get the time he really needs there. Can he win the Champions League this year? Yes, I actually think he can do. I think PSG have the squad to. It's just there are some very good sides in Europe. You know, Liverpool.
Yeah.
Bayern Munich of the champions, Atletico Madrid. Whether he can navigate that so soon, I'm not so sure. PSG have a lot of injuries at the moment. Whether this summer, depending on who his targets are, because again, a big problem with Pochettino at Spurs was he wasn't allowed to spend the money he was allowed to spend. Jose Mourinho has been allowed to spend a bit more than I think Pochettino was allowed in the final year. So it'd be interesting to see with the so-called blank checkbook what he'd be
Yeah.
allowed to spend on PSG and who for. There was a big emphasis at his previous clubs on youth. Will it be more of a win now mentality at PSG? I'll be quite interested to see who they bring in.
Yeah, it's a very good point on the checkbook because it's the first time we've seen him perhaps with a checkbook under his belt, rather than having to kind of build from the youth, build from kind of, well, not scraps, but not having that kind of war chest to spend.
Yeah, I think my final verdict was I think he will do well. I think he'll obviously win the league and probably the domestic treble, which isn't that easy. I think he can deliver a Champions League. Whether he can deliver it in 2 years,
Mm.
it's Russian roulette because the Champions League is so hard to predict. But I'm putting my hat on Pochettino to really try and establish himself on the scene as a world-class manager, which I think he is. I just think he needs the right team and the right support around him. I think there are clubs with better profiles that he could have gone to, but I think he has the ability to succeed at PSG, and I think we'll see that in the next few years.
Great, Etches. So that's all from us this week, guys. Thank you very much, Etches, for the insight on Mauricio Pochettino. We all want him to do well at PSG. I think the whole Premier League is rooting for him, even the Arsenal fans. But yeah, thank you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers, guys.